Well, Harvey, we really appreciate you coming today. Now, Harvey's got a real challenge here, okay? We've got an hour to play with, but he could speak an hour on what his whole thing is about. And I asked him, we're not doing the living donor workshop that he does, but he'll talk about that as an example of how his personal passion is out there changing the world, one person at a time. And that's our theme. That's what he's talking about. Harvey, take it away.
Hey, thank you. I appreciate the invite here and our talking about doing something for a couple of years now. As I mentioned, I had a kidney transplant 4 years ago, but my story is much longer than that. And 4 years ago, if you asked me, would I be sitting here talking about organ donation, getting involved, being involved, helping people, trying to make a difference and promoting, making a difference to others, I don't think I would have believed that. So, but my life really has changed as a result of that. My initial contact with the transplant community was my father-in-law passed away and his organs and tissues were donated. So that was my initial experience to see what was going on in the community. And as a result, I started to volunteer promoting organ and tissue donor registration. I live in Chicago for Illinois, and I'm sure you know that drill as well as I do. Over the years, I watched the kidney transplant waiting list do what it did, and I have PKD, polycystic kidney disease, and I knew if I ever needed a transplant, I would go the living donation route. But like many, lived in denial and thought I would never need a transplant. But that day came, and my nephrologist said, it's time. You know, you are at the point where you're qualified to be on the waiting list, so you got to start the process. I was pretty upset because she also told me that I might have to start dialysis in 3 or 6 months. And very upset about that at the time. Really knew very little about dialysis other than it wasn't something I chose to get involved with or really to have to do. So I started looking for an organization that could help me better understand living donation. I really didn't know much about it, knew that it was an option. Couldn't find such an organization, but more importantly, I was looking for someone to help me understand how do I go about asking someone to donate. It was an extremely uncomfortable thought to have to do that. And what happened was I educated myself, went through the process, was very fortunate that my wife was able to donate. And really, it was a successful procedure for both of us. And afterwards, I realized that I learned so much about this that I can help others who are going through the process. And knew the numbers. And so I started the foundation with the primary goal of helping people understand living donation. Because there was information out there, it just wasn't getting to the people who needed it the most. But more importantly was the fact that everyone thought you had to ask people to donate. And I found out that, you know, when you talk to donors, they say, no one asked me to donate. I heard about my friend or family member's need, and I started to ask questions. So I developed the workshop. I do webinars, workshops. I travel nationally, put them on for transplant hospitals, National Kidney Foundation affiliates, PKD Foundation, NKF affiliates, work with Fresenius and DaVita in terms of getting the information to their patients so they can come to the workshops and help these individuals. And the workshops are small groups, about the size of this. I don't want 50 or 100 people in the workshop. It becomes very, very personal, very interactive. People get involved. It's a 2.5-hour program. The first half, we talk about living donation in terms of what it is and the options. And the second half, we talk about how do you communicate that need. You know, how are you going to go about that process? And so from those programs is the way Jim and I initially met, and hopefully we can continue to help these individuals. Let me just give you an overview of what happens in the workshops that I do. As I said, my primary mission is to help people who need a kidney transplant pursue living donation. But I get involved in a couple of other areas. I speak to the general public about living donation, Rotary clubs, Kiwanis, chambers of commerce, educating the world about living donation. They don't know much. One of the first questions I ask in that presentation, who's familiar with the program to register to be an organ and tissue donor? Everybody raises their hand. and they're proud to raise their hand. And it's great that they raise their hand, that they're aware of that program. And then I go through a 15-minute presentation. I ask them, well, did you learn something about living donation now that really surprises you and make you kind of maybe take a different point of view if you hear of someone that needs a kidney transplant? Everyone raises their hand because they don't know much about living donation. So that is the goal, to educate the public about living donation. Because not only do we recipients have to communicate our need, we then have to educate these people about living donation because they just don't know much about it. So educating the public is really an important part. And then training social workers and nurses. I found out that they don't know much about living donation. So it's a train the trainers class. I provide them with information about living donation, material on how they can reach out and help their patients, because they just don't have the knowledge or unfortunately sometimes the time to talk about living donation. The compelling need, I'm sure, is very well known here. One of the strange figures, in addition to 89,000 people on the kidney transplant waiting list, is that about 400,000 are on kidney dialysis. So there's a disconnect here. There should be 400,000 people on the kidney transplant waiting list, not 89,000. Many of those people are no longer healthy enough. They're no longer suitable to be donors, but they were when they started the process. CMS has a ruling that they require the dialysis clinics to educate their patients about living donation. Well, it really doesn't work very well. It's a bit of a conflict because if they do a good job there, they're going to lose a customer. So again, something has to be done there in terms of changing that whole process. And the waiting list in 1989, there were 16,000 people that were added, that were on the waiting list. Now we're up to just about 90,000. And every day, 92 people were added to the waiting list. It really is quite amazing in need. I show this graph and spend a fair amount of time on this in my workshop. It obviously shows deceased donors, trying to point, but unable to. Deceased donation, longevity, and living donation. We basically say an organ from a living donor lasts twice as long as one from a deceased donor. Not exactly, but the numbers are pretty good. But also, if you look at the first bar there, it says donor 0 to 5 antigen match. The quote matching process or matching need is no longer what it used to be for kidney transplants. So they group those together because there isn't a significant difference if someone's a 0 match or a 5 out of 6 match. But there is on a perfect match, and that holds true also with living donation. So that's to give you a bit of an idea of what that's all about. If you're not familiar with paired exchanges, a very simple one here, donor 1 wants to donate to recipient 1, but they're not compatible. Same thing with donor 2, incompatibility there, a simple paired exchange. I showed 2 here, could be 4, 6, 8, 10. They've done 14 and 22. They do them over a couple of days because the only limitation is the number of surgery doctors and rooms, surgical doctors and rooms that they have. So this has become extremely popular and an incredible opportunity for incompatible pairs. They're also doing compatible pairs, believe it or not. So if you have a compatible pair, why would you get involved in a paired exchange? Because you can increase the likelihood of a better match or a more desirable donor. For example, if you are an O donor, you would be a very desirable individual to get involved. And maybe, let's say I'm involved in that pair exchange and my donor is 50 years old, 55 years old. If my donor goes in with an O and we're able to do many pairs now, maybe they'll say to me, you know what, we'll get you a 25-year-old donor. Kind of interesting. The future would be, they say to me, we'll get you a perfect match. That would really be something in the future. So compatible donors will be something that pair exchanges will be getting involved in the future. And if you're not familiar with ongoing pair exchanges, they are probably the most exciting part of what's going on. This may be a little confusing here, but an ongoing chain can only happen if you have an altruistic donor. And we are getting these altruistic donors out there now. A couple of years ago, there were only 150, then 200 last year. Now there's closer to 300 per year. Not a big number, but they can have a big impact. So under this scenario, donor 1 is compatible with recipient 2, but donor 2 is not compatible with either of those, so they can't do a straight pair exchange. The altruistic donor comes in and donates to recipient 1. We have an extra donor here. And so they call him a bridge donor, and that donor can start a chain tomorrow, next week. They had a situation a year later, the chain was continued. So one altruistic donor can, in theory, help an unlimited number of people. It can go on for years and years and years. So this, again, the numbers aren't huge out there, but they can be and have a significant impact in the future. And you can see here a bit of the unlimited possibilities. This woman, Christina, just wanted to donate to one person, ended up donating to 11. And a surprise for me, my organization has gotten involved with many altruistic donors. I never would have expected that. But they're contacting me, and if you think about it for a second, they don't have any place to go to. There's no organization that can support them. And many altruistic donors go straight to the hospital and say, I just want to donate, and they walk out of the hospital thinking they don't want me to donate. Well, many hospitals think that altruistic donor is crazy. You know, they say, go see somebody else. Don't get involved here. So it's one of the challenges in terms of educating the donors to what to expect when they go to the hospital. As I said, that would be the first half of my workshop, and obviously it's much more extensive than that. And then the second half is communicating their need. And we do a lot of role play, etc. But the main, I'm going to oversimplify what I do, the main thing we do in terms of talking to people is say to them, just tell your story. Don't ask anybody to donate. Just tell them your situation, what is going on in your life right now. If they're interested, they'll start to ask for more questions and say, what's that all about? So just tell your story. It's a subtle distinction, but a very important one for someone when they want to go out and start letting others know about their situation. So telling your story, by the end of my workshop, I must say 30, 40, or 50 times. Making a difference, just think of it as just daily acts of kindness. It doesn't have to be this huge thing that you get involved with, or that you do, or that takes 1 day a week, or 2 days a month, or whatever. It really could and should be a daily activity. I don't know if you've seen one of the ads on TV. One of the insurance companies starts out by someone picks up a little stuffed animal to a woman and she hands it, and then someone else sees that act and it becomes duplicated through the whole person where someone else does something else. Kindness is something that can be very, very simple and something that is contagious when people start to see it. And it doesn't take a lot. It really is a state of mind. And knowing this is my behavior. This is what I want to project. This is what I want to do. It can grow, but even these small acts, which I'll talk about a little later, can be very significant in your life. And every day you can do this, or every day, at the end of the day, you can say to yourself, what have I done today to help someone in their life? But, what one thing could I do today that would make a positive difference in the lives of those around me? This can be something that is, the front of your notebook, in the kitchen, on your night table before you go to sleep, or when you get up in the morning, put it in the bathroom, okay? Someplace that is just a constant reminder that I can do these things every day. They don't need to be something that's monumental. Luck happens when preparation meets opportunity. It's amazing how lucky I've been in the last few years. Meeting Jim, okay, was luck. Okay? People call and tell me all the time how lucky they got. And think about what your day is like, or this experience that I think we've all had, where we look at the end of the day and we think back on a certain thing. Why didn't I act this way? Why didn't I do this? I could have done that. Why, we are constantly faced with things that we can do. But if you're prepared to do them, typically these opportunities are not there again. Okay, they're fleeting. And if you don't say something or do something in that moment the moment is gone, and then you're off to something else in your life. So you can take advantage of that every day and make it a part of your life.
Let me answer that. Luck. We didn't meet by luck. He prepared, he was advertising what he was doing. And by reaching out to Trio, opportunity was created. And when we were planning this workshop, it was a natural to show somebody with passion to make a difference in the world. So don't take luck as most people see it. Take it the way he just defined it. It's preparation, meeting opportunity. And that's what you did.
Thanks. Thank you. Most of the important things in the world have been accomplished by people who have kept on trying when there seemed to be no hope at all. My wife gave me this one day when I came back from another transplant hospital that I met with and heard the same story from them. And the same story is, oh, we have a living donor program. Okay, we don't need a living donor advocate from the outside to help us. Okay? And it's very difficult every time I go to a hospital because the statistics are showing that whatever they're doing really isn't working. In the last 4 to 5 years, the number of living donations have gone down. Deceased donations are also flat. But when you take a look at living donation, there's so many positives that's going on, from the surgical procedure to the recovery, to the outcomes that they now have, showing that there isn't a long-term negative impact from donating, no increase in hypertension, diabetes, et cetera. These people don't need transplants more often than someone else. So I am almost constantly faced with this when I go to transplant hospitals. They should be my partner, and some days I'm talking to them almost like a salesman wants to sell them something. You know, I'm trying to give them something that will increase the number of kidney transplants, but they all have their challenges in terms of allowing an outsider coming in talking. But I am there continuing to go in there and convince them that if they continue to do what they've always done, they'll continue to get what they've always got. And we need to move in another direction because what's working with living donation right now apparently is just not being effective. So all of you are transplant recipients, and that alone makes you an inspiration for other people. I mean, it is truly amazing what people start telling me about how, in awe they are of what I'm doing, especially people in the community. They're in awe that I am talking about living donation when no one else is. That when a hospital has someone that comes in and needs a kidney transplant, they say, go find a donor. And that I'm trying to really address that issue. So all of you really are an inspiration to start out. And so you've got a big check on one side of your ledger book, whatever your passion might end up being, because you come from that world, you've been through that world. And I wouldn't be afraid of using it, okay? Because it is something that has made a difference. Maybe we'll talk about a little bit about some people who have made an impact. And we're always thinking of the Bill Gates of the world, that are making an impact. And they are the ones often that are getting publicity. But it's not only the Bill Gates of the world. It is just everyday, normal people that want to help. Does anyone know Nancy Goodman Brinker? Anyone? I'll give it a second or two. No one?
What's his name? Take a guess.
No guess? Okay. Nancy Goodman Brinker. Her sister was Susan B. Komen. Okay? All right? That's who Nancy is. We don't know who Nancy is now, but we darn well know who Susan B. Komen is and their cancer foundation. Okay? And the story is, quite a long one, but basically, before Susan passed away, she made Nancy promise that she would continue and really start to try to help these women that are dying in the thousands. And no one is out there looking to help them. And it is truly amazing what Nancy has done over the years. Really, truly amazing. Just another normal person out there trying to help. That's who she was at the beginning. Anyone know Wendy Kopp? Wendy Cobb? Somebody? Nobody?
Not the wife of Dr. Cobb.
I don't know that. She, Wendy Cobb started Teach for America. Oh, typo. How come I don't see the typo when I'm reading it? Teach for America, not America. Wendy was a senior at Princeton, and she wrote a senior paper. Here's what I think makes sense, okay? And she graduated, didn't have a job, didn't know what to do, and said, I'm going to take this and make it a reality. And she had a heck of a time at the beginning trying to make this a reality. But look what Wendy Cobb did. Just another senior that graduated from college one year. Truly amazing what individuals can do. Susan and Bob Wright, probably the even more nondescript individual. They started Autism Speaks. Okay? They had a grandson who had autism and realized nothing is out there to help this child or to help, our family. There was nothing there, no research, just a lot of arguments of what autism was, what it was caused by, what was going on. Nothing was there. So they ran into a friend, they had a friend, okay, Bernie Marcus, who happened to be in the hardware business. He started Home Depot, okay? And he gave Susan and Bob Wright $25 million to start Autism Speaks, okay? They just had an idea. They went around to their friends and they asked them, get some help. Where could we start? What do you think we can do? Okay, just two ordinary people, really a grandmother and grandfather looking to help their grandson. So truly amazing. How about Chris Maburu? I didn't know Chris Maburu either until a few weeks ago. But Chris Maburu is the main actor in a movie. It's a documentary called A Small Act. He's a young boy, grew up in Kenya, and he qualified to get involved in an educational program that would pay for his school. He didn't know it at the time, but the woman that paid for his education was a Holocaust survivor that lived in Sweden, who was approached to give $15 a month to help a young boy in Africa or a young person in Africa go to school. It was a small act. Small act. That's what Hilda says. Hilda Bach is her name. She says it was a small act, that's all. $15 a month. Didn't mean much to her. Okay? But years later, Chris wanted to find the person that helped him get through school. Because Chris not only got through school in Kenya, but he got accepted to Harvard Law School, graduated, went back to Kenya, started a program that teaches other young children, or provides scholarships for other young children, okay, to go to school. And what does he name it? He names it the Hilda Bach Foundation. He goes and finds Hilda and brings her back to Kenya to see what he's done. And she's visited many times. So her small act, that was really not much to do. It didn't inconvenience her. It wasn't a lot of money. And she didn't do much about it. So these small acts that we can do can really blossom and really develop into something a lot more once we get involved. And you never know where it's going to be taken. I'll tell you a little bit story about starfish. There was a poet. He liked to walk along the beach in the morning before he wrote. So he's walking along the beach one morning and he sees a young man. It's like he's dancing or throwing something. He walks up to the young man and he says, "Young man, what are you doing?" The young man says, "I'm picking up starfish and throwing them into the ocean." "Why are you doing that?" He says, "The sun is up and the tide is out and the starfish are going to die." He says, "Young man, thousands of starfish and miles of beach. How could you possibly make a difference?" The young man bends down, picks up the starfish, runs into the water, throws it out into the sea, comes back and says, "You made a difference to that starfish." And the poet doesn't know what to say. He's really kind of dumbstruck. So he walks away and he's bothered all day by it. what he just experienced. And what he realized is that this young man was doing something that we all have the gift to do. All of us have the gift to be able to make a difference in our own little way. And I'd like to believe that there are a lot of people out there throwing their starfish every single day in their own way. There are many things in life that will catch your eye, but only a few will catch your heart. Pursue those. I hope today you've heard something, a little bit of information, something motivating that'll make you go ahead and pursue your starfish and your pursuit of making a difference. So, thank you.
I've got something that your organization should have a lot of. A license plate frame that moves around your license plate on the back of your car is Miracle Maker kidney donor. I've sold many of them. I'll give you my card and you can order as many as you need.
Steve?
Very good.
I'd like to hear from Amy as to what her role in this is, because she's the donor.
Amy, I'm going to ask you to come up here so you're on camera while you do this.
Before she answers, interestingly enough, in the workshops, we often have recipients or donors that attend. I try to get recipients and donors that attend. First workshop we did, it was just Amy and I. She was there. And the workshop's over, we thank everybody, and as I find out later, no one leaves because they've developed all these relationships during the workshop. But at this particular workshop, everyone stands up and they go to Amy, of course. Okay, they don't want to talk to the recipient. They all want to speak to the donor. What is going through her mind? Why did she do this? Let me ask her questions. It is interesting.
It's obvious.
Yeah.
She'd be the person.
I was sitting on the side saying, what about me?
But maybe it's also partly because we're all recipients. Maybe, like, we have a donor family member, maybe he's more interested in hearing your story than a donor. I don't know.
So happy to answer any questions that I can. Obviously, Harvey and I kind of oversee the foundation together. I have a full-time corporate job that enables us to continue to move forward with this. But when I can, I certainly join in on the programs to answer questions, advice, and some things.
What kind of follow-up care do you get after being a donor?
It's very interesting. You really don't get any follow-up care. There's some immediate visit, I'm going to say about a month later, just to make sure everything's okay, which it is, for the most part, generally goes okay because it's a pretty clean procedure for the donor nowadays that they've done it the way they do. But there isn't a lot of follow-up attention to that. So,
How do you feel about that?
I don't think about it too much because I'm, knock on wood, just feel fine. I think if I maybe had any issues, I would be certainly frustrated that, hey, wait a minute, how about me, let's make sure, do no harm and that kind of thing. But because I haven't had any, I guess it hasn't been as much of an issue. And I don't think we hear much about people having issues post-donation. But it's a good point. I might want to do some looking into that law.
If I may to that, Amy. UNOS today, one of the committees is putting together exactly that so that all the living donors are tracked by mandate by the transplant centers. They blame the donor right today. Most hospitals say, oh, we can't do that because the donors don't cooperate with us. And we're basically saying, no, that's not the case. You must find them. Because right now they just, I think the only thing they feed back on is whether they're alive or dead. And there's a lot more that needs to be known so that people who are going to be living donors have more facts behind making a decision. The picture today is exactly what you just said. But that rule is going through UNOS right now, and you're going to see it eventually come out that the hospitals must follow at certain times and up to at least 2 years out, which is a burden on the staff, but they're going to have to do it. So something is being done about that, Steve, just so you know.
I mean, I don't know how I can put this delicately other than it stinks. And perhaps because I may need a kidney at some point. Two of my siblings have perfect matches, and that really bothers me.
The issue is financial. And to break it down to its common problem, it is a financial issue that they would welcome bringing someone in, doing blood tests, just doing a normal checkup, et cetera, if they got compensated for it. That's a challenge. In fact, the hospital we went to gave Amy a call around our first year anniversary and asked, a couple of questions, have you seen a doctor, high blood pressure, what's your creatinine, thank you, goodbye, kind of thing. And I called the hospital back and I told them, you're better off doing nothing, because that really is not appropriate.
But, separate from the hospital where we had the transplant, I will say my doctors know full well about the situation. Every time I get a checkup, which is every year, they're very conscientious about asking about issues. We're watching, my kidney function very carefully. So I don't feel like I'm not getting care. I'm just not getting a lot of follow-up from the place that did the transplant. But clearly, you have your own doctor, and like any other situation, you monitor that carefully. Again, nothing's been an issue, so we haven't had to do anything, but every once in a while I'll have a medication I might need to take or something, and the doctor will say, well, given the kidney situation, I don't want to do anything that aggravates it, so why don't I give you this drug instead of that drug? And I appreciate that they're kind of remembering that let's not aggravate, the situation, but I can't say that I feel like I'm not cared for. I'm just not getting a lot of follow-up from the place that did the transplant. That part isn't there, but I don't think it should be anything that would get in the way of your family members being able to be donors, because again, I can't say enough about how the process went and how good the doctors have gotten, how much they know to, again, do no harm to the person who's donating, and how well you can, really live just as if nothing had ever happened after being a donor.
And a question for both of us. Go.
I was gonna say, given the nature of the living donation becoming more and more popular and impaired kidney change and stuff like that, and how we talked about yesterday, how slow UNOS is to respond to anything with committee and policy changes and stuff like that, it's not surprising. I think eventually they will catch up and get more, but even just to get this one policy, like Jim was talking about, it's been controversial because people don't think it's enough, or they don't want to accept it because it's not this or it's not that. How are we going to pay for it? So getting anything passed for some kind of policy for monitoring outcomes is a long process. And so, hopefully someday they'll catch up, but nothing goes fast there with the U.S. policy.
Just want to clarify, it's not so much the monitoring. The people are going to their doctor. There's no data collection to know overall what's going on out there.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to address. Doreen?
I was just gonna say, I know when my sister, she was required to meet with the nephrology department, the transplant surgeon at 6 months and then at a year. So what they did, I don't think she had to see them since, but she did. I know that she had said, they want to see me at 6 months and a year. She goes, how often are you seeing them? And I said, every 3 months. And she goes, oh, okay. It was one of those, she was surprised. This is somebody who had never had a surgery, who had not seen a doctor except for, when she was pregnant. And so she was not one of those people, very, very healthy, very yoga, great crew, and all of these things. So more of an alternative. So for her to be going to this huge transplant center was not natural or normal, but she did it.
And how is she doing? Yeah,
she's doing very well. She's doing very well.
And you said 7 years, right?
7 years.
Steve?
Question for Harvey. And it seems so perplexing that with the advances in surgical techniques, laparoscopes, and that the number of living transplants is, I think you said, slightly declining. Why? It makes no sense.
It makes no sense. I don't know why. I've asked many doctors, and no one has really a good answer as to why. I wish I did.
Well,
there are a lot of reasons that it should be, increasing. It just isn't.
The transplant center will do everything possible to eliminate that donor. If there's anything wrong with them, they are eliminated. So you're in perfect health if you come up.
Yeah, the quote-unquote average American will not be able to donate.
Really?
They're not healthy enough to donate.
So if you've got 2 brothers or somebody else willing to donate, tell them to go be checked out. It won't cost them anything, and they'll get the best physical money can buy.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no standard for a living donation in terms of, for the donor. So one hospital may say the individual's not suitable, you go to another hospital and they say, no, they're fine. You know, then it's more the decision, obviously, the donor needs to make.
About 6 months after we went through the transplant, my assistant at work found out that her husband needed a transplant and she was dying to be the donor and just all kinds of, and she went into one hospital and some distant family history of heart trouble surfaced, and she had no issues, but like whatever, a couple generations earlier, and that hospital refused to let her be a donor, and she was of course beside herself because he was really very much in need. And so we kept saying to her, you know, go to another hospital. And in a big city, you can find other transplant centers. And so, in fact, she did go to another leading hospital who had no issue with it. They did the transplant, everything has been fine. But I think to some degree, they don't want to mess up their numbers, right? They don't want to take a chance that there will be an unsuccessful match. So in fairness, you know, who knows, you hope that they're trying to be balanced about it. But in fact, you wouldn't want anybody to just take one answer and just assume it's not doable. They do each have their own standard, whatever that is, so you can kind of check around it. I suppose if at some point you really get rejected a lot of places, the point would be maybe this isn't safe for people and shouldn't be done, but it doesn't mean one turn down doesn't mean that there isn't a possibility.
Yeah, and the same is true on deceased donation. There are individuals that go to the hospital, get worked up, and the hospital says you're not healthy enough to get a transplant. You know, they can go to another hospital. It's not, there isn't a specific standard for that.
Does anybody else have any other questions specifically about the living donation experience before we move on to 3 other stories, like Harvey's, of people going out and making a difference in the world? If not, I'm going to say thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming to us, and I'd like to present a little gift from Trio. You're always one choice away from changing your life, and he was one choice away 4 years ago, and look how he's changed both his life. What did you do as a career before you got into this?
Entrepreneurial, was in the real estate business, telecommunications.
And now he's still an entrepreneur, saying alive. Harvey, thank you very much. I would say that there's probably an opportunity here for Trio chapters. I think that Harvey is very, strong advocate for this, offering his services. If you have a local Trio chapter that wants to sponsor him doing a webinar, or even coming into your area, maybe, does it take some financial support to do that?
No, either one. We could do a webinar. I'm doing webinars with dialysis clinics and some hospitals for their, specifically for their patients. But I go to a city, go to a Phoenix or Ann Arbor, and we'll contact not only your constituents, but the dialysis clinics, the transplant hospitals, nephrologists, et cetera, and get people to come.
One great thing for Trio to get behind and help use this service out in your local area. Harvey?
Question.
Yes.
Do you ever talk to or have you come across anything similar for living liver recipient donation?
I have not, and I've been asked by some doctors to develop
Because I
this.
feel like living kidney is much more, not popular, but aware. A lot of people don't realize you can donate a lobe of your liver.
Yeah, it's a
You
very
only
small.
have one of them, so
Yeah.
technically you can't donate.
It's a small number of people.
Yeah, it's a lot
as you know.
smaller. It's usually,
Yeah.
like I'm in pediatric kind of, so it's usually a parent to a child, which makes more sense because it's a much smaller person, smaller donation.
I have pediatric nephrologists that want me to develop a program like this for the parents.
Yeah.
But a couple challenges. One is, again, you're not talking big numbers, and I didn't have that experience. It would be hard for me to discuss it.
Harvey, thank you very much. Merle, why don't you come forward? We finally solved the problem with the camera. Whoever's on is in a seat, and they don't move. This is good. I don't know, Merle, I think you've got a problem. We're going to discuss your problem. Yeah. This guy has got a voice that would boom any place, and when he speaks, it's so soft. It's a soft giant, right? So I'm going to ask you to use that mic, just because I don't want to change your style. And we've asked 3 people who have made a difference to just talk about their passion, what they're doing in about 5 minutes. And that's almost impossible to cope.
Okay. Everybody hear me okay?
Now,
All right. Well, I want to start off by saying this is a picture from last weekend. The gentleman on the left is Devin Allman, Greg Allman's son, and he's a music performer also. And the shirt I'm wearing is the shirt some of you saw last night at dinner. It's from the concert that I do every year called Merele Zuel, which was inspired by my illness and my frustration with not being able to get listed due to some lab work that I had that was unfavorable, and I had to wait a period of time. They're like, we can reevaluate you. And I kept trying to beat my head against the wall and force the system to get me on the list, you know. And what I decided was to channel my energies into something positive. And I came up with this idea for this benefit concert. And so it started the first year. I had my and I ended up having my transplant and working on it from the hospital, doing phone calls and marketing stuff, planning it. So I had my transplant on February 23rd. I was in the hospital for 30 days because I had some complications. Had like 3 open heart procedures. Got out for a week, was out and back in for 12 days. And so from that time, and the first concert was on May 5th, Cinco de Mayo. So basically spent the majority of the time in the hospital prior to the concert, and came out, and everybody was amazed that I was able to be there, and it was really an eye-opener for the community and for the public. And I worked part-time at this club where we have the music, so a lot of people knew of me. In fact, I was supposed to work for the mayor. We were having a fundraiser for the mayoral candidate at the time. And one of the ladies that was there at the club worked for the OPO. In fact, she was the second in charge at the OPO. And so she was kind of able to let him know that, yeah, everything's a go. He's in surgery now, and let everybody know that I was doing okay. And since that time, what I really found was I wanted to make it a little easier for the next person, maybe, to get their transplant or get through the process. And so I do a lot of volunteer work, do some mentoring of other recipients. And the concert has evolved into a big event in Kansas City, and it's sort of synonymous with organ donation and awareness in Kansas City. And it's been embraced by the local OPO. They advertise it for me through their ambassador newsletter and to the donor families. And we have our transplant team members that participate. And what I do is get up and I make stage announcements, but then I'll invite other recipients up on stage. And I'll say, okay, Julie, you can come up and help me with the raffle drawing. And I'll tell people, see, it's not just old people like me that get transplants. There's a young lady, could be your sister, could be your daughter. She's had a liver transplant 10 years. It's proof, again, this does work. Organ donation, we're showcasing the success of recipients. And it is a fundraiser for heart transplant recipients. So we do get a lot of heart recipients come there, but we also have people that are, hey, speak up and say, oh, I had ligament damage and they put something in me, so I'm kind of, we have kidney recipients, we have, I don't think we have any liver. Oh yeah, Ray's wife, Susan, came this year, she's a liver recipient. But a lot of the staff from the hospital come, and the key to getting people to participate is it's not really dry, it's not like, okay, we're gonna have a little educational conference. It's a fun concert, so we get a lot of people that come just because they want to come see the music and they happen to be there that night. And at the same time, then we're opening their eyes and making them aware, and they're like, wow, I had no idea. And you look around the room here, in a big room, 400 or 500 people at an outdoor patio concert, and I'll say, okay, well, look around. Now I'd like for all of you to see some of your heart recipients just stand up and look around the room, and they look at the people and go, okay, it looks normal. People have this idea in their head that somehow having a heart transplant is a negative thing. Or my wife even works in healthcare, and part of our story is what I use also. She was my respiratory therapist, and we met when I was being worked up for transplant. And so I always joke, tell them, even when I was sick, I was still working the magic. And that I signed up for the bonus plan. I didn't just want a heart, I wanted a new woman to go with it too. So, and we've been together. She was there with me before the transplant and through it, and then we got married. We've been married a year and a half now, but we've been together since before my transplant. And having that person with you, obviously we all know that have been through a transplant, having family support of any kind is very important. But since that time, since my transplant, I've also gotten involved in the I won the Stellus Ride of a Lifetime contest, rode on the Donate Life float. And then I wrote a book about my experiences called Hearts Like Mine. And I haven't really sold a lot of copies, but it's a tool for just sharing my story. And I also created the Merele Jam website when I first came up with all this, because the domain name was actually taken by somebody in Texas, but he wasn't using it. And I said, hey, can I get it from you? And he said, sure. So we transferred the domain registration. I got the domain name, and then I created a website. And on that website, I posted, there's a video of me talking, just like a little 5-minute video of me sharing my story, a little bit about my clinical history of how I got there. So it's a good reference point for mentoring new recipients. And then there's also a pathology review of my old heart. And the one thing that always gets a reaction out of people is the picture of me holding my old heart about 17 days after transplant. I went to the pathology lab and got the mask on and got the purple gloves on. And I walk in, and it was kind of wild because you see a Craftsman bandsaw there. And it's like, and it's kind of a mixture between a shop and a lab. And it was dissected, and the pathology guy. So I have like a disclaimer on there. It's not for everybody to watch, but if you're curious, there's and it's another way to just kind of let people know that this is this thing that was causing me so much trouble. I wanted to feel it and experience that. This is what was giving me so much trouble for 11 years. But I found out when I was 10 that I had a defective aortic valve, so I always knew I was going to have some kind of health problems. But at Stellus, after I won the contest, they recruited some of us that won the Ride of a Lifetime contest to actually be ambassadors for their transplant experience program. So I go speak around the country at other hospitals and now with healthcare providers to share my story. And what we touched on earlier is by personalizing the story, it's much more powerful than the Stellus person being, they show up too, but by having an actual recipient there share their story, it makes it more convincing to these case managers or whoever that are deciding on these cases. It personalizes it. And one of the ways this was personalized, if you know the history, about a year ago in June, actually Greg Allman, Devin's father, had a liver transplant. And of course he's one of those cases where I said, well, he was a pretty hard partier and all that. Well, he had actually been sober, clean and sober for about 12 years before he had the transplant. And they attributed his hepatitis to a tattoo or something, who knows. But he played at the event last year before Greg had his transplant, and so there was kind of a direct family connection there also. And again, he's about 30, and so tying that in with the younger generation and making people more aware of it, and his father, was a good angle. But we try and provide a good show with the concert, and then people will come, and I try and structure it so I kind of hedge more money on one night than the other, so no matter what happens, I'm going to hopefully make money, and we have every year. And I want to also thank Herb here, because his company, XDX, has been a sponsor for 3 years now of the concert, and also some local people in the community. But it's really just about, the fundraising is okay, the social worker can use that money to help other recipients, but the main objective is increasing awareness and showcasing the success of organ donation. And so by putting my story out there, I didn't really hold back when I shared my story, and putting it out there in so many different ways, it helps open eyes in the public, makes people aware. Because we think if you know somebody that's had a transplant, I think you're more likely to maybe consider being an organ donor. And when I had my transplant, I never knew anybody until I had mine. Now I know all kinds of people all over the country, but I didn't know anybody that had ever had a heart transplant or a liver transplant or kidney transplant. So it definitely makes a difference when you have that personal connection to it. Or you see Lou, say, oh, Lou, yeah, the guy that's the cook there, all the Marines see it. If they knew you had a heart transplant, they'd be like, hey, this guy looks normal, he looks just like my brother or my uncle, it could be anybody. They're going to be more likely to maybe want to be an organ donor, But it's been my experience, though, the younger generation is more open-minded to organ donation because transplant's more common now. With people of my age or our generation, they weren't having them as often. So I think it's a little easier sell with the younger generation. It's just a little education.
So anyway, that's what I do, and I'm happy to be here. I founded the Kansas City chapter of TRIO and was asked to be on the board, and so I'm continuing my efforts in that capacity, and I'm pleased to be here. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Carl. Also, as you saw yesterday, on the UNOS Patient Affairs Committee, among other things. We, by the way, got a response to the survey we did with the member at large thing we talked about the other day, of a living heart donor. Now, some of you know how that works.
Yeah.
There have been a number of them. And it's a case where somebody needs a lung transplant, and they have found they do better if they can give the entire package of the heart and the lungs from a deceased donor, let's say, to somebody who needs lungs. What are you going to do with the perfectly good heart that you're taking out? You pass it on to somebody else. And so you have what many people never have heard of, a living heart donor. And so living donation, livers, kidneys, and hearts are possible, and lungs too, right? At least one of them.
Rich DeVos is a famous one for that. Rich DeVos.
Yes. Now, Mark was going to be next, but you know, he's from the South, and he said, Jim, I would never go before a lady. So I'm going to ask you, Julie, if you'd come on up and go first.
So my story is a little different from a lot of transplant recipients in the fact that I didn't have an underlying disease, and I was a perfectly healthy kid until the beginning of 7th grade when I was 12 years old. And all of a sudden I just started getting sick, throwing up. They thought it was the flu, and then after a week of being sick, I started to get a little jaundice. And then, you know, they started doing some tests, seeing if it was hepatitis, whatever else. After about 3.5 weeks, I was getting sick every single day. I went to Cincinnati Children's, and they did a little evaluation. They said, yeah, your liver, something's wrong, but we're still not sure. Go home. We'll keep an eye on everything. The next day, I was retaining water, so they said, come to the hospital right away. The very next day, I had a liver biopsy, and they said I had 7 days to live with my liver. I was listed right away and received a liver the very next day. So it was kind of a very quick pre-transplant. I didn't really have that waiting list time that a lot of people talk about and need support for. So I can't really relate to the pre-transplant experience. But yeah, I was in the hospital only for about 2 weeks, and then I had several complications the first year. I had rejection. I've had rejection 4 times now. I had some artery problems. I had to have a second surgery revision. But I've been perfectly fine since '03 was my last rejection. And you know, I try to live my life to the fullest. So my hardest issue after transplant, besides the whole rejection medical complications, which everyone goes through, was being a teenager trying to go back to school. In 7th grade, if you can recall, kids are very shallow and judgmental and materialistic, and they really don't think about their health at all. So when I was coming back, I was very excited to be a normal kid again, going back to school after being out of school for 4 months. And I was so excited to be normal, to see a lot of my friends I hadn't seen in a long time, and I was not welcome back in the way that I was expecting a lot of kids, because I had the prednisone side effects where I didn't really look the same. I got the real bad moon face. I gained about 50 pounds in 3 months. I had really bad prednisone side effects. I think it was also because I was starting to go through puberty, so the whole adding the steroid hormone to my already crazy hormones, it was just too much for my body to handle. I blew up like a balloon. So when I went back, people didn't even recognize me, and I got who is she doing in her class, and what is she doing here? Why is she here? And I was like, I'm your friend. You've known me for a couple of years. Like, but I'm ready to be a friend again. So that was really depressing for me, and that was, I think, the hardest part of my whole transplant journey was just the social and mental aspect of trying to become normal again, which I've heard is kind of very similar, and I assume with everyone, but especially with teenagers, because it's just so hard to be accepted again in such a shallow population.
Can you talk to us now about the passion that you found in your life since then?
Yeah.
Where do you see it going? Especially
So
with the youth
that's
organization.
what's really stemmed my passion of kind of bridging that gap and getting support for adolescents. Because I've talked to some other teenage people, or recipients at Cincinnati Children's, and they agree that there isn't really anything there for young adults and teenage kids. And we have kind of a different myriad of problems and issues that we have to deal with compared to like little kids or older adults. So I, through a long roundabout, I don't know, work experience, because I started in University of Cincinnati, we have to do co-op for engineering. So for biomedical engineering, I did my first co-op at a Cincinnati Children's Research Lab. And just working there, I went to a symposium about liver transplant tolerance. And after that symposium, I went up to one of the docs, that was one of my research doctors as well, and said, I'm really passionate about liver transplants, especially in kids and adolescents. And I really want to, figure out how to get rid of immunosuppressive medication and induce tolerance, because there's a lot of long-term complications that aren't so great. So I told him I'm really passionate about it, and I know this is what I want to do. I know I'm still an undergrad, but I plan on going to medical school. And how can I get started in this field now? And he said, you know what? I know you really like this stuff, so let me look in the budget and see what I can figure out. And sure enough, a couple of weeks later, he offered me a position in his lab. And that's where I'm working now. And so I get to talk to a lot of other liver transplant recipients at Children's. And it's really eye-opening, but that's also, it made me realize that there are a lot of other teens and young adults out there that want something. There isn't really too much. And the social workers at Children's have just started to try to get a support group going, but it's not successful at all. The last 2 meetings, I think they had 2 patients, and the one before that, they had 1 participant. So that's not a failed effort, but it needs to be helped. And so I really wanted to try to get something going. I went to a conference that my boss funded me to go to. He's very encouraging, best boss ever. And I talked to a lot of people, a lot of pediatric doctors and surgeons, and kind of told them that, I feel like this is something that needs to be there, like this adolescent, especially adolescent to young adult, and the whole transitioning care as well. And all the doctors totally agree with me, like, yes, there is a big gap in that. There needs to be more. It's just, how and where and what do you do? And that's when I kind of discovered the Trio Youth Circle, and I thought, well, that's perfect. That's pretty much exactly what I want to do, so why not get that going and see what we can figure out. So there are a lot of other pediatric doctors that I've talked to that think, that would be perfect, and they want to get it started. So hopefully I can work through my network to, get it out to the pediatric transplant centers and hopefully get something started. It's just, like any other organization, and not specialized focus, but it's not the biggest population, so especially pediatric transplants, and they come from all over the states. They're not going to be traveling just for a meeting. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges for a youth circle is, at Cincinnati Children's, they get people from Mississippi to Illinois to Missouri coming to Cincinnati for their transplant. They're not going to travel that far for a meeting.
So the technology that we're developing, both for the member at large and the Trio Circle, has certainly a direct application here. And I think this is a double example of what Harvey was talking about before, right? Preparation and opportunity to meeting each other to form what most people would say is luck. And look at what she just did in getting to work, where a lot of recipients would like to work right back where they work, because they have such a passion for the staff there, et cetera, et cetera. And it didn't just happen. It wasn't lucky. I mean, she prepared herself. She had something to offer. She went up there and said, hey, Doc, how do I do this, right?
Yeah.
At the same time, the other part of it is getting her involved in Trio Circle. Again, preparation, reaching out there, the opportunity. We're looking for leaders like her to make this the reality. So we're lucky too, in the very sense of making luck happen, right, Amy?
Yeah, my boss brags that I'm not afraid to ask for things. So I've asked for my position, I asked to go to this conference that he funded for me. And I also pride myself in trying to live my life to the fullest. I mean, especially I had a very quick time that my life could have been taken away very quickly. And this is a picture when I traveled to Paris. I did an international co-op last summer. I lived in Germany for 6 months and I traveled all over Europe. Spent lots of money and almost out of debt from it, but, but I traveled to 8 different countries and 18 different cities within a 6-month period. So
Living life to the full.
yeah, it was pretty awesome.
All right, we're not going to get a lot of questions here, but real quick, 2, and then we got to get on. Steve?
Julie, talk about, now, if the children are having transplants, obviously their parents have huge involvement in it.
Yeah.
Does that present a challenge in terms of, what you're doing with kids versus their parents?
Yeah, and the biggest problem that, especially when relating to transitional care, is a lot of parents tend to overprotect, and that's, they obviously want to take care of their child, and it's kind of a fragile child, and they kind of overprotect. But a new push just real recently is for the doctors to try to encourage individuality and getting the child involved, and really pushing for the child to kind of still experience their own life and not be overprotected. So you got to kind of tell the parents to back off, even though they really don't want to, because they're afraid to, and we don't want to let anything bad happen, so we want to be over their shoulders, but that's really going to halter their growth and their development. There's it's known that there's developmental delays in a lot of pediatric transplants, and they are contributing that, they think, to parents over caring and not allowing their kid to experience social normalcy. And that's obviously creates problems, especially when they're becoming adults, transitioning care, as well as going out into the workplace and trying to be a part of regular society.
Right,
Yeah.
I'm going to have just one more quick question from Jamie. I had a hand up before, and there'll be opportunity over lunch to address her individually for dinner tomorrow. Jamie?
You set such a good example with your bravery in traveling into Europe, because that, travel overseas is a concern of mine, because I'm always concerned that things don't happen.
Yeah.
I got this idea that, we live in hospitals are good enough to treat me.
Yeah.
Was that a concern of yours?
A little bit. I have been healthy since '03, and it was just last year, so I was a little more comfortable in that fact. I did talk to my transplant coordinators ahead of time and made sure that they were okay with it. And I get blood drawn every 3 months, and I get my medication every 3 months in the mail. So I had to align that, and I asked them if it's okay to go ahead with the 6 month, and they're like, yeah, that's fine. If you feel like anything, you want to get your blood checked while you're over there, if you feel like it's necessary, then we can work something out when they're over there. And then I also had to talk to the prescription service and told them, I need a 6-month medication instead of 3 months, which was kind of a hassle with insurance. But it was a little scary, and there were a couple times where I was like, I had some digestive issues, and I was like, oh, I hope everything's okay. But it's always in the back of your mind a little bit, and it passed, and so it was a little nerve-wracking, but also very gave me a sense of freedom and individuality.
We have a lot more of that story, hopefully appearing in Lifelines and some of our e-blasts, as our youth. Their stories are on the website, by the way, including hers that joined us recently. It's already there, along with a picture and so forth. So we're going to move on quickly at this point, because lunch is out there, and I would want to be the speaker between lunch and me, but Mark, that's what you are, so come on up. And I'd just like to say, Mark just came back from Ireland, and before that, he was invited over to England for a very special interview, and it was a very different format. And I said, we're going to try that. And so really it was meant to be something in this ancient building that the organization pulled together, and they had Mark come all the way over to the United States to be a keynote speaker at their luncheon. Well, he didn't have to fly all the way from there, but he flew back to Ireland for our center, for our event here. And so Mark, talk to us a little bit about how much fun that was, but more importantly, what's your passion like? You're not a transplant recipient, you're a friend of one, and that's how you got involved. And you've been a supporter of Trio for a good number of years now through the business you have of audio conferencing. And so, what's your passion in life? And how are you changing the world?
First of all, the question I got for you is where do you find that picture? That
Hey.
thing has been hidden for years.
You know, on your website.
I didn't know that. Look, I had more hair then. Anyway, you're correct. I am a good friend of a transplant recipient. And the first exposure that I had to transplants was with Jim years ago. We had a business relationship together when he was at a global company, and we were his provider for conference call services. And as time went on, he shared with me this book that was continuing to be written. And that book was a great inspiration to me. The fact that you never ended that book.
Well, the gift from the heart is my story. Constantly grows because you write the last chapter, everything should die. Well, it can't be the last chapter, that's it's gone.
That's right, exactly. Great inspiration. Years ago, when I was a little kid, my grandmother told me, she said, somebody said, what do you want to be when you grow up? Well, I want to do this. Well, it was funny. I said, one of the things I'm famous for saying was, I want to either be a preacher or a bank robber. Because they always felt I'd run for Congress and kind of put the two of those together. But my grandmother impressed upon me at a very early age that you can do anything you want to. You can be anything you want to be. And she was totally correct. As all humans have, we all have our own limitations. But I was talking to Julie a few minutes ago to let her know that the only person that will ever limit you is yourself. That's it. There's places I have been. There's no reason for a boy from Birmingham, Alabama to have ever been, opportunities that have been open for me. There's no reason that I could think of, except for divine intervention, divine guidance, that has given those to me. And one of the passions that I have is not, it's funny, it's not business. And people always say, wow, you have such a passion for international business. No, I have a family. I have 11 and 9-year-old and a wife, and I have to do international business.
You should have had a picture of your boys with the red hair.
Exactly right. They would have been lost among the crowd in Ireland. But my passion is, there's a Bible verse, and Julie, I'm going to give it away now. It's Galatians 6:10. It says, and therefore as we have opportunity, we should endeavor to do good to all people, especially to those in the household of faith. But think about that. As we have opportunity, we always have opportunity. We should endeavor. And endeavor is not just try, it's deeper than trying. To do good to all people. Well, some living donors right here that did good to him. Look at what you're doing with Merele Zuel. I mean, everybody in this room has a story. And as I said yesterday, the thing that is so impressive about this organization is, contrary to the American Cancer Society, none of the board members in Birmingham have cancer. I've never met somebody on the March of Dimes that was crippled as a child. But I've met a room full of people who are transplant recipients. And that's the story. And you take that, and Julie, I don't know how old you are, but I think I'm twice plus your age. I am, plus 2. That's right. But you have a lifetime of this story of inspiring people. Years ago, we moved to this house in Birmingham. Mind if I tell this real quick? I moved to this house in Birmingham. I know, I'm on you too. It was a fairly large house, and one that we got a good deal on, so we thought, great, we won't ever have to step over each other. And as time went on, I said, we need to have a party. Let's have a party 2 nights before Christmas, call it a Christmas Eve party. And that way we can just make friends and bring friends and have other friends to meet each other. And Allison, my wife, said, it's got to have a purpose. I said, well, what purpose? She said, you know something? We are very blessed. And we have 2 healthy, smart-mouthed children. But, Mark, you know it yourself. you spent the first year and a half of your life in an oxygen tent at Children's Hospital. And she said, there are kids at Children's Hospital on Christmas, and they won't be home. They may not get toys. So what we did is we decided that this party, in order to gain admission, you have to bring a toy. And the first year we had 40 people come, and so we had about 45 toys. Some of them were new, some of them were recycled. And then we had the idea of everybody we met during that year that we got business cards from and put them in a database. And we would add them to the party. So this thing has grown, and we have, as Jim has said, I own a global teleconference company. We operate in 65 countries, so I've got a lot of customers. A lot of people I've met in my travels, they get invitations. Well, I'm very happy to say that last year, we had over 200 people inside our house. We had over 600 toys that were given just last year. And when we go, and it's not that we take them and drop them at the front door. On Christmas Eve, we end up going to Children's Hospital Birmingham. They have 4 of these tables lined up, and the toys are just overflowing. And the children come down. The ones that are mobile come down. And you know something? That party is not cheap to put on. My wife doesn't cater it. She does all the cooking. She sends us away to our vacation house for 2 days prior to that so she can get everything ready. It's a lot of hard work. But see a child that has a bald head and an IV in an arm, in a wheelchair, roll over and pick up a toy and smile. It's worth it. It is truly worth it. So what my grandmother told me years ago is correct. You can do anything you want to do, but I'll add, anything that you want to do will impact others, so please make it possible. Okay?
I just want to re-emphasize, we've had some interesting presentations, a lot of education, but that's not what this whole summit is about. We haven't got to that part yet, but you're feeling it. Before you leave here today, we want you to take the examples you've seen to empower yourself to believe that you can do what the Harvey Mysels and the Amy's are doing, what everybody else you've heard about are doing, and what is your passion, and what are you going to do about it now that you see you can do it. Doesn't matter what age you are, 23 or at the other end of it, what is it you can do? And whether you're Mr. DeVos in his 70s getting heart transplant, how old is he now?
He's in his 80s.
In his 80s, still doing great things, okay? The individual, you are the individual. You can make a difference, one person at a time. What is that passion? What is it you're going to do to change the world as you leave this summit? Right now, leave this room and go enjoy lunch. We'll be back here at 1 o'clock. And again, Herb, thanks for lunch.
I loved it. Well, I was a little disappointed because I went during the most tourist season.
Part of my license plate right says Harvey Mysel on it.
So it wasn't quite the romantic city that everyone makes it out to be. And, yeah, I was just gonna say, when you're around.
Yeah, I've been all over the world.
So many history.
Other Bangkok.
Like saying, step over there.
Yeah.
Especially the
I was on 9/12, but Hong Kong. I got stuck in Hong Kong. Fly
And
out
like,
here
if
like 7 days.
my made up fiance was taking here.
Hit the limit on my credit card. Oh my God, I'm not here anymore. I don't know what I'm gonna do.
Good for you.
But Clyde here, he gets a book. You might, if you went traveling, you might want to call him up and do their transplant center.
Yeah, my transplant center wasn't any help when I was going to travel. I just needed a placement in the United States.
That's the here. So I stayed where they are.
And she said, no, I'm worried about your heart. And I said, no, I'm just. So we had run into the office afterwards. Yeah.
They know you are hard. You are, education.
Yeah, that's a
Very large network.
One for.
Yeah, I mean, there's parts, we see all the museums, it's amazing, and it just kind of gives you an image, like, I know, they're walking around some board. You're lucky.
I know it's not.
I mean, the fact that you have not necessarily available.
I learned a little bit of German, but honestly, it's really, and I worked all German, but I did start a business in English because my scientific farmers. And it really did give me an experience.
There. What seems like.
Yeah, I don't way to clear. I gave it 3,000.
Yeah, good.
Well, that's going well.
The lady told her, she said, no one goes, that's